Before you watch this episode of our cityCURRENT radio show, I want to invite you to join cityCURRENT's e-learning and online personal development platform called GrowthCurrent. I'm Jeremy Park, host of the cityCURRENT radio show and CEO of cityCURRENT. GrowthCurrent is your exclusive ticket to attend virtual events with global thought leaders, national guest speakers, and experts who can help you grow personally and professionally. It gives you access to success secrets, lessons learned, learning modules, and so much more. Being online, you can join us from anywhere in the world. Subscriptions are only $8 a month, or you can do bulk subscriptions for your team. Check out growthcurrent.com to learn more and to join us in our efforts to power the good. And now, on to the show. Welcome back to the cityCURRENT radio show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're honored to be with our next guest, our good friend, Dr. Joseph Michelli. He is a best-selling author, a speaker, and someone that is filled with amazing insight. And he has a new book coming out, Stronger Through Adversity, that we will talk all about. But how are you doing, Dr. Michelli?
I'm great. It's always good to be with you. You're such a community builder. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, we've had the honor and the pleasure of having you speak at our cityCURRENT events, and you are a prolific writer, and so we'll talk about just overall everything that's kind of been in your world, and you have a ton of books. And so the Starbucks Experience, 5 Principles for Turning Ordinary into Extraordinary, the New Gold Standard. So you cover a lot, the Airbnb Way, 5 Leadership Lessons for Igniting Growth Through Loyalty, Community, and Belonging. You cover a lot in the world of customer service, leadership, innovation. And I feel like a lot of that kind of comes to bear in this next book, which right now is Presale, but Stronger Through Adversity. So give us just a little bit of a teaser for your background, and then we'll dive into this book.
Yeah, so I'm a consultant to organizations on leadership and customer experience, and then the books kind of emerge out of my consulting with brands like Mercedes or Starbucks. And it was in the middle of it wasn't all that much in the middle, pretty much March of the pandemic. I was working on task forces with many of my clients, and we were trying to figure out, how do we retain customers? How do we keep our people safe? What's true? What's not true? And being on this task force, I saw lots of different leadership approaches. Participatory management approaches weren't working out really well because you couldn't get everybody's voice in the room before you had to make a decision. People are way too impulsive. We're not working out really well. And so I started to talk to leaders about how are they doing emotionally? What were they trying to achieve? The intentionality behind their leadership in crisis. And that opened up the door to not only my clients, but their clients. You know how this works, Jeremy. Somebody who knows somebody, and 140 leaders later of global companies, we had a book out that talked about how they approached the biggest leadership challenge probably of our lifetimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about the brands and the people that you had a chance to interview, Target, Google, Microsoft, Coca-Cola. I mean, these are big names in the corporate world, and then also nonprofits, Feeding America, United Way. So you cover a broad spectrum there.
Yeah, we made a conscious choice not to include political leaders because we think there's a whole other layer of leadership when you're trying to earn people's votes. We were looking for nonprofits, public safety, and corporate leaders. So when you talk about Target, we're talking about Brian Cornell, the CEO of Target, or Hans Vestberg, the CEO of Verizon. These were the senior level leaders, CEOs, and C-suite players who took the time to have conversations with me about how they tried to steward these ships in very, very turbulent waters.
Talk about on your end where you started the conversation with them, because I think it's interesting with each one, they're facing very different, but obviously similar sets of challenges in terms of we're all playing by the same deck of cards, so to speak, with the pandemic. But how did you approach the interviews with them to kind of navigate, because they could go in so many different directions? How did you approach the interview with them?
I first tried to understand how they were leading themselves, right? I mean, in order to be an effective leader, you kind of have to be taking care of yourself. And quite frankly, some of them told me they just weren't. They weren't sleeping, they weren't eating, they were working way too many hours. They'd lost track of putting their mask on first, which is a business principle I talk about in the book. They were trying to handle this like a sprint, not a marathon. And so many of them had to figure out how to get back to some self-care. Some of them weren't reaching out to others. They were locked in their cocoon, so they had to leave their island and seek consultation with colleagues. And those who did were doing extremely well. They were challenged, they were supported, they were gaining insights. So we kind of started with lead yourself. And then I think from there, we started to say, how do you make prioritized choices when there's such poor data, so many moving target data, so many changes in regulatory operating conditions. And so there's a whole series of principles that they extol about how they tried to find something to grab onto that was meaningful, how they admitted to not knowing what was true and really were transparent with that with people in ways they might not have been, and how they even acknowledged mistakes that leaders frequently try to just gloss over and move through.
Were you able to follow up? So it's one thing to have a conversation early on in the pandemic, like you're talking about, where it's like you're just grasping at thin air in many cases. And then maybe 3 or 4 months later, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're in this for the long haul. We got to pull our head out of the sand and kind of start making some concrete decisions. In other words, was there kind of any follow-up after things might have been a little different?
Yeah, you'll take someone like Michelle Gass from Kohl's, for example. She's the CEO of Kohl's. And her conversation with me was what it was like in those first days, just trying to maintain financial solvency, looking at every line item, cutting a marketing budget for a brand that just doesn't do that, all the way to the point of the reopening and her being present for store reopenings and the need to be out there and willing to show to her people that she was as willing to put herself on the line as the people she asked to be in the stores daily. So yeah, we saw just continual twists and turns of what it took to be a leader at various stages in what is a continuing pandemic.
Yeah, about to say, we're still really kind of in the middle of this. When you look at some of the things you're covering, crisis management, keeping employees and customers safe, maintaining a culture of engagement, rapid innovation, dive into some of these major themes that you cover throughout the book in terms of that you want the reader to really kind of pull away.
Yeah, most of the people I talk to as leaders said, we always give lip service to safety. We always care about safety. It's operating in the background of most of our business. This was the first time that they had to think about the fact that employment could be lethal for lots of people, or engaging as a customer with us could be lethal. And so suddenly the decision-making shifted and safety did become supreme. It became the driver of all decisions. And for many of them, they were willing to forego short-term profitability in order to ensure that they had people to keep the store back open again when regulations lifted. So you saw short-term decision-making around profitability pushed back a bit as long as they could stick around for the long game.
What's something that you learned going through this? Because as I mentioned, you're a prolific writer. So you've seen so many different sides and had a chance to interview so many amazing leaders. What's something that either caught you by surprise or something that you learned in this process?
Yeah, one metaphor came out that I never really thought about. As a leader, I often think you fix your position, you're up in the front, you lead from the front. But as I got through this with people, I heard them talking about leadership as if you were in a wild horse pack. All right, like not something I think about. A wild horse pack has an alpha mare that's in the front. They have a bunch of shaping herd horses that are in the herd that keep the herd behavior organized. And then the alpha sire's in the back, and he's kind of moving the pace of the thing. And what I heard from leaders was they were moving forward into the pack and back at all kinds of different times because their people sometimes just needed them to back off so they could innovate without having to check in with the leader. Other times they had to be out front, said, we're taking this hill. We're not absolutely certain what's up there, but we're going to go together.
Yeah, I feel like so much of it, I mean, I've told my team this and my wife as well. It's like basically what I knew yesterday almost becomes irrelevant today. And it's like you have to start all over, and it puts your ego and everything else in check because you realize that in many cases, you just don't know. And a lot of stuff that you think you do know, you realize, no, it's probably not going to work in this case. So you continually have to push that bar.
I think you're going to have to look back on this and saying this was the age of technology. We were salvaged by technologies that allowed us to work from remote locations. Certainly cashless pay is probably going to be around. Curbside delivery is going to be around, all aided by technology. But I also think it's a time of humility and vulnerability. I've seen much more of that from leaders than I'd ever seen before. Let's hope it sticks on the backside of the pandemic.
What's maybe one or two other things that you think are good that will come out of this? And you alluded to technology, curbside delivery, the bankless transaction, or the physical, not the cash necessarily, but the digital currency and the transaction there. I think there is, even from a media standpoint, the ability to do what we're doing right now, Zoom. The technology has gotten so much greater that now we can produce these radio shows and TV shows doing it like this without having to be in the studio. So I think there are some good things that are happening. What's maybe one or two other from your vantage point?
The irony is that we need to connect with people. All this technology that we're getting, it really tells us the importance of technology aided interactions, but they have to be human powered. We are craving people. And so for me, one of the things that we often take for granted is people. But then when we couldn't get to them, and when people were dangerous, and when we had to be distant from them, suddenly we wanted to go and sit in a dining room that we might have otherwise thought, do I really want to go? Now, yeah, I'd love to be having coffee with you, Jeremy, if we could do that.
Yeah, that it does change what you appreciate and the gratitude. I think there's so much more to that. I agree. When you look at from a reader standpoint, what's one or two main principles, main tenets that you want them to draw from this book?
Yeah, I would hope that people would read the book and ask themselves a lot of questions about how they lead and how they position themselves for resilience. Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion, once said that we all have a plan until we're punched in the mouth. And this was a gut punch, a mouth punch. And I think this is a book about how do you make sure that you focus on the things you can control and influence the things you can, and let go of so much of the rest of it, and make sure that you're not playing for just the round to get through the round, but really seeing a bright future that you can be resilient to shape.
One of the things I love and I appreciate about you is that you do so much give back on your end, including with this book. There's a give back component. So talk about that.
Yeah, we're donating a portion of my royalties to Direct Relief. Direct Relief is a international relief organization that's dedicated to helping people on the front lines, whether that's with PPE or food distribution. So I had a lot of different wonderful nonprofits who participated in the book. Goodwill, Salvation Army, United Way, all of those folks are in the book, Feeding America. So we had a lot to choose from. We selected Direct Relief, who's also included in the book.
Talk about Presale, where to go, how that works, because even on your end, you've got an opportunity to get a kind of a signature plate with it. So you've got some neat tie-ins with this. So talk about.
Yeah, I mean, you can order it anywhere that good books are sold. I mean, Amazon certainly has it available for pre-release, but we have an offer just for 40% off of list, which is less than what you can buy on Amazon, hard to believe, plus shipping, and it still comes out well below Amazon. So 40% off, we'll sign a book for you. You can order it now through the book launch date, which is December 15th. Good Christmas gift, we hope. So strongerthroughdversity.com is the website. So we're moving through it, strongerthroughdversity.com.
And then on your end, share a little bit about, because although we're in the pandemic and, even you and I are doing the virtual, the Zoom and everything else, you do a lot of speaking. And so this book is a perfect platform for you to speak at, obviously, workshops and conventions and things like that, even digitally. So talk about kind of that side of your business and what you do on the speaking side.
Well, I'll be speaking tonight in Singapore. I spoke in Australia recently, so technology does help. It's a heck of a long flight and a lot more jet lag than I'm experiencing right now. But I'll be in Nashville speaking, face-to-face, I think, come January. We're scheduled to do that. So we're hopeful that the face-to-face opens up safely for people in the future. But if it doesn't, we're certified as a virtual presenter. We have green screens and use all the state-of-the-art lighting technology. And I think you've had to adapt to create something engaging vis-a-vis this medium of, either auditory medium or the visual auditory mediums that people rely on so much to consume information and content today.
When you look at, especially in that context, what's something that you take from the book, Stronger Through Adversity, and you apply it on that regard?
Well, I think one of the foremost things that I try to do is listen. So when it comes to doing a presentation, I am much more about tell me what success looks like. Tell me how people are feeling right now and what emotional outcome would you like to have happen? Not just intellectual change of their thinking patterns, but how do we want to leave them feeling? And I think that Stronger Through Adversity really proved that you had to hear people, not just their words, but listen to the emotional state beneath the words so that we could respond and comfort as well as get them maximally productive.
What, from kind of looking ahead, and obviously whenever that is, start to normalize, what do you think is something that's going to come out as a main driver? And obviously you can use the book as the context of this, but what's something you think that when we come out of this, that as a nation, as a world, we're going to look back and say we're coming out stronger because of these main things that we learned going through this?
I think that we need to use technologies to make life more convenient for consumers. And many companies had been resistant to do the investments in that and still required consumers to be inconvenienced in many ways they did not need to be inconvenienced. So my thinking is that we're going to get on the other side of this. A lot of those digital transformation roadmaps that had been put out there 5 years have been expedited. The genie is out of the bottle, and we're going to have choices throughout our journey with brands. Do I want to go digital? Click. If not, do I want a person to serve me? I'll opt into human. And I think that'll be the legacy of this for many companies and for most of us as consumers.
Yeah, great point. Wrap up with, once again, the website, where to go to do the pre-order for Stronger Through Adversity.
Yeah, you almost said the whole thing right there. StrongerThroughAdversity.com.
You make it easy. Well, Dr. Michelli, thank you for all you do. Thank you for being a part of the show. Greatly appreciate it.
You know, I'm a fan, Jeremy. I am a fan.